Okay, geweldig. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah. If someone makes a sukkah on the top of a wagon, so this is mamash a sukkah mobile, or on top of a ship. And Rashi tells us that on top of a ship, there's no barriers around that would block the wind, so it's going to be particularly windy. Ksher is kosher, v'oisin la b'yomtiv, and v'oilim la b'yomtiv, which Rashi says is not a chiddush. It's only mentioned here because of the second case of the Mishnah. Barosha ilan, oil kabe gomo ksher. If you made a sukkah on a tree or on a camel, will be kosher. But there, then you cannot go on it on Yom Tov because it's a gzeira. You're not allowed to be mishamish with Bali Chaim, or you're not allowed to climb up on a tree on Shabbos because you might break a branch. Now, there's actually a shaila if you're allowed to go onto a ship on Yom Tov. On Yom Tov. There are those who hold that you're not allowed to board a ship on Yom Tov because it's a gzeira that you might start the ship and move it. But even if there's such a gzeira, even if you hold you're not allowed to board a ship on Yom Tov, you're for sure allowed to board a ship if there's a sukkah to use for the sukkah because it's a mitzvah sukkah. There are those who speak that out. Now, as far as Barosha Ilam, there's a whole shaila. What would be if you did go up on Yom Tov? If you were Yotze, let's see Rashi. Even though it's mobile. The top deck, and it's very high. And there's no mountains around it that would like sort of be windbreakers. Therefore, it's very susceptible to wind that could uproot and blow the sukkah away. Share the deer's arai sagiba because this Tana holds that a deer's arai is acceptable. While in Labi Yom Tov, the Rashi should deploy the business safe of the Ein Island Tana Reish of Island. Baroisha Ilan Tikain Moishavai Baroisha the Asa Sham Mechitas Eschach. So it seems like the bottom, the floor of the sukkah would be on top of the tree. Share is kosher, you can use it a chalamoid. So Rashi says, even though you're not supposed to go up, you'd be yotze. So there's a whole shaila here. Why don't you say that it's a mitzvah ba'avera? There's an issue with your bottom. To use this, how is it that it wouldn't be a mitzvah ba'avera? So there are those who learn that the only time you say a mitzvah ba'avera is either by an issue deraisa, which is only the rabbanon. There are those who say that you only say a mitzvah ba'avera if the etzem zach is also. For instance, a stolen lulav, the lulav itself is also. But here there's just a gzeira, the rabbanon, that you shouldn't go into the sukkah on Yom Tov. But there's nothing in the sukkah itself that makes it not good, and therefore there wouldn't be a problem of mitzvah haba there. Okay, shtayim be'ilam, bi'achas b'di'adam. 3 of the walls are supported. 2 of the 3 walls are supported by a tree, and 1 is b'di'adam. Shtayim b'di'adam bi'achas b'ilam. In either case, if you would remove the tree from here, the whole sukkah would desist, would stop existing, and therefore it's called you being mishamish for the tree if you go into the sukkah. But with shalish b'di'adam, the achas b'ilam, then we're not relying on the tree. You can go up on Yom Tov. Rashi explains what does it mean shtayim b'ilam v'achas b'di'adam. So Rashi samach karkois hasukah rubai b'ilam. This means the floor of the sukkah, the base of the sukkah, is being supported mostly by the tree. The asa sviva v'roisha ilam shtei mechitzos, and you made on the tree. So you have the floor, the base of the sukkah is resting on the tree. And then above that, you built 2 walls that would also then be resting on the floor, which is resting on the tree. And then you made some posts or a wall that goes from the floor up to the floor of the sukkah, which supports the third corner of the sukkah, but again the floor of the sukkah, and then you continue the walls all the way up, so that acted as a wall as well. Part of the floor of the sukkah, the base of the sukkah, is being supported by this man-made wall. It's not just that we're supporting the sukkah from below, from the ground, that has to extend further up to form the wall. So Rashi tells us, Hoyel, Bibalt, Be'im, Yinoto, Ilan, Neufel, Karkoisha Sukkah, if you pulled the tree away, the sukkah, the bottom of the sukkah, the floor, the whole base would collapse. It won't, the sukkah cannot be independently supported by the two walls that are supported by the ground. Therefore, in Ilm of Yom Tov, Mishtamash Bilam. Tosfos argues with Rashi. So Rashi learns that the bottom of the sukkah is being supported by the tree. That's how Kach Pish B'Kudshus. But Tosfos says, "V'limash Machi Perek Shehichshich the Dak Meyochad Stad Nasur Darmin My Love Doch Ilan." So Tosfos learns that it's fair to say that this is pshat, because the Gemara elsewhere learns that you're not allowed to rest on the side of a tree. You're not even allowed to use the side of a tree. But the way Rashi is learning, we're not using the side of the tree. We're actually putting the floor of the sukkah and resting it on top of the tree. So therefore, Tosfos wants to learn that wasn't the case. Tosfos wants to learn, speaking sha'ilan defanish l'sukkah. The shaila here is that the tree isn't supporting the bottom of the sukkah. Rather, you're using the tree as a wall of the sukkah. The konim shal sukkah b'smachim al, and the schach is what's resting on the tree. But it's not the floor of the sukkah, the base of the sukkah. It's resting on the tree. It's the schach that's resting on the tree. The tree is acting as a wall. The michanis by Yom Tov, you cannot go into this Yom Tov. You're not really climbing on the tree. You're just inside a sukkah that the schach is supported by the tree. We're afraid that you'll put something on the schach, which is then resting on the tree. So Rashi over here learns the tree supporting the floor of the sukkah, and Tosfos is learning that the tree is just supporting the schach of the sukkah. So let's see the Gemara by it. The Mishnah. If you took away the tree and the sukkah still stood independent, then it's kosher. That's not called resting on the tree. Which time is our Mishnah consistent with? Zok Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, it would be consistent with Rabbi Kiva. The Tanya we learned. If someone built his sukkah on the top of a tree, on the top of a ship, Zok Gemara, Rabbi Gamliel Paisel, Rabbi Gamliel holds its apostle, because he holds, as we said, sukkah dir is kva b'inam. Rabbi Kiva machshir, and Rabbi Kiva holds that it's kosher. Now we have a very interesting story. So Rabbi Kiva holds a sukkah b'rosh hashvina is kosher, even though it can be blown around. Rabbi Gamliel holds its apostle. Ma'aseh Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Kiva, shahayu boin b'sfina. They were on a ship. Amar Rabbi Kiva v'asa sukkah b'rosh hashvina. Rabbi Kiva, l'shitase, that you could build a sukkah there, went and built a sukkah on top of the ship. L'machar, the next morning, nosh faruch v'krasa, it blew away. So Rabbi Gamliel told him, Amar Gamliel, Akiva, what happened to your sukkah? Where's your sukkah? So it's very funny or unusual that Rabbi Gamliel should be taunting Rabbi Kiva about his sukkah. So there are those who learn that he actually wasn't taunting him. The machlokes as to whether or not such a sukkah is good is because Rabbi Gamliel held that you needed a sukkah, a ruyah l'shiva, which the Gemara is going to talk about a little bit later. You need a sukkah that can last for 7 days. Rabbi Kiva held, no, it's enough if it lasts for 1 day. So we were saying, look, you have a sukkah that's not royal l'shiva. It's not royal shiva. I just got a WhatsApp. Oh, from Chaim Tzvi. Oh, Chaim Tzvi must have come in person, not realizing that I'm not there today. Oh, so I better respond to him.
I'm here.
Oh, Chaim Tzvi is here? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, you know why? I don't have my thing set up to show everybody. So I'm sorry, Chaim Tzvi. I said yesterday that I'm going away, so I'm just going to be online. Mitchell today will be online, and Sunday and Monday. So we'll learn much of Shabbos, but we're not going to be learning on Shabbos because I'm not going to be there. Okay.
So Sunday, Friday, and Tuesday, I get up at 4:30. Okay.
Okay. So Sunday and Monday, it's only online, so you don't have to come all the way in. Okay, so Amr Abaye. Abaye said, "L'chula alma, everybody holds. Heicha the eina yechayla lamod ruach mitzuya. Any sukkah that cannot survive, even in a standard wind, diabosha, a standard wind that you would find on dry land, loy klumi. That's for sure not a good sukkah. It cannot stand. And Rashi tells us that if we look at the Rashi, loy klumu means afil dius they can't even withstand a regular wind that you would feel on land. That's not a sukkah. Rashi also tells us that Eina Mitsuya Diabosha, strength is a Ruach Mitsuya Bayam, and Rashi tells us that Yechoy Lam Bruch Eina Mitsuya Diabosha, Tani Ruach Mitsuya Diyam. So let's see this inside. Amar by the Chul Amma Heichad Eina Yechoy Lam Bruch Mitsuya Diabosha. If this sukkah cannot even survive in a Ruach Mitsuya of dry land, Lav Klumri, that's not a sukkah at all. It's not even a Dirs Aray, as Rashi says. But if it could survive, even in a Ruach She'ini Mitzuya of dry land, which Rashi tells us is what's called a Ruach Mitzuya, Besvina, Bayam, then Kula Amalei Pligi Diksher. Because this sukkah can withstand a normal wind that you would normally encounter at sea. Key pligi, the machloikas between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Kiva is b'di Yechoyla Lamoid Beruach Mitzuya Diabasha, v'eni Yechoyla Lamoid Beruach She'ini Mitzuya Diabasha. You have a sukkah that could stand nicely if it was in a normal wind of a yabasha, of a dry land, but it cannot withstand the normal wind of a sfina, which is parallel to a very high wind, the yabasha. Rabbi Gamliel Sober, sukkah diris kva b'inam. Rabbi Gamliel holds a sukkah needs to be diris kva, and therefore the chivin de'eni yachol lamed beruch mitzuya diyam lav klumi. The sukkah is in the yam, and it has to be able to withstand ruach mitzuya diyam, and it has to be last there for 7 days. And therefore, since this sukkah cannot last even through a ruach mitzuya shabiyam, it's not a good sukkah. If you keep it over, sukkah diris arabiina, the chivin the yachol lamed beruch mitzuya diyabashak sheir. The sukkah gets determined. The validity of the sukkah is determined based on a wind diabasha, and if it can withstand the normal wind of land, that is considered a kosher sukkah, no matter where you build it. And therefore, even if you build the sukkah on a ship where it would not be able to withstand even a normal marine wind, nevertheless, the sukkah is still kosher. Okay. Remember, we had at the beginning of the Masechta, someone listed off a whole bunch of Tanoim who hold that sukkah dirs kva b'inan, and Rabbi Gamliel was one of those shitas, because you see here he holds that a sukkah that's not very sturdy, it cannot withstand the normal wind of sea, it wouldn't be a good sukkah. Oil gabe gomo. Now we're discussing an interesting sugya of making a sukkah on top of an animal. So let's see the Halakha Gemara. Zok the Halakha Gemara. Masnisin mani Rab Meir. Our Mishnah would be consistent with Rab Meir. The Tanya we learned. If you make your sukkah on top of a behema, and once again Rashi explains this as al gabe behema, so it's Rashi towards the top of the amud. Kigoin nosan dalsois al nesusim veim karkois. So once again Rashi learned similar to what he learned by the tree, is that the top of the animal held the base of the sukkah. So you put the base of the sukkah, the floor of the sukkah, on top of the backs of the animal, and then you built up on top of that. You built on top of that. You built a sukkah. So the halacha is Reb Meir machshir, Reb Yehuda posel. Reb Meir holds it's kosher, Reb Yehuda holds it's posel. So therefore, our Mishnah that says it's kosher could only be following the sheet of Reb Meir, not the sheet of Reb Yehuda. Now, Tosfos argues with Rashi's explanation of what this means. So let's see Tosfos. Tosfos argues for a very valid reason. Al gabe behema. Zok Tosfos, it's the second Tosfos on the Amid. Pirsha Kodrus Nosan Dal says al beisusam. You put doors or like a piece of plywood on the backs of two horses. Liyosam karkois sukkah. And that acted as the floor of the sukkah. And then you built up a sukkah on top of that. Read the posel. This is contradictory to what Rava said 2 days ago, to what Rashi learned 2 days ago in Daf Chof Aleph. We said that if you put your schach on top of a bed, it won't be a kosher sukkah because it's arai, because it moves. Well, here, this is the same thing as that. So why is this different than putting your sukkah, the karamita, since it can move around, Rashi says, it's going to be possible. So this sukkah that's sitting on top of the animal can move around. So therefore, it should for sure be possible. The Yesh Mefarshim, therefore, Tosfos wants to argue on Rashi's chat of Al Gabe Behema and say it means something else. This is not when the whole thing is mobile on top of the behema. Why did Rabbi Yehuda need to bring a pasuk to support his position? You could learn, just like we learned in the case of the sukkah on the bed, it's not something that's stationary, it moves around. Ella, the way Tosfos wants to learn the case over here of building a sukkah on a behema is Hamid sukkah al dalit kundasim. You actually created a frame with 4 posts and then you put schach on top of it. So the schach was permanent. It was not a problem of kavah, that the whole thing is resting on an animal. The somach alein schach, you put the schach on top of this permanent platform. But the hichne sham ha-behema v'asa aleh karkiisa u'mechitesea ad l'schach. So what you did is the schach is held up independently on a frame above everything. And then you brought the animal underneath the schach and you built a floor and the walls on it. But the schach is not being supported by the animals. So there you don't have the problem of kari amita, where the whole thing is not permanent. And therefore, here we have a shaila. The whole problem here is that you're going on the animal on Yom Tov, but the animal is not impacting the kashrus of the sukkah. So the chazal shuvah in oilam rabbe behemah b'yom tov. The whole problem here is that you can't go on the behemah b'yom tov, but it's not like the schach is being supported by an animal, which would then be possible, just like it is if you put your schach on top of a bed. And just like over there also, the Gemara said, where wouldn't it be a problem if you built a proper frame independent of the bed, put up the schach, and then you use just the bed for the walls. So that's how Tosfos wants to learn the shaila over here. I'll have a behemah. So my why would you be to hold that you can make a sukkah on a behemah? It says Chag HaSukkah is tasalacha shivas yom. You should make a sukkah. You should make the yom tov of sukkahs for 7 days. And we learned sukkah haru'uya l'shiva shema sukkah, a sukkah that can be used for 7 days, meaning every single day it'll be mutter to go into the sukkah. That's going to be a good sukkah. But sukkah she'enu ru'uya l'shiva lo shema sukkah, a sukkah that cannot be used for all 7 days, because one of these days are yom tov and the Shabbos. That wouldn't be a good sukkah. Reb Meir holds, I don't understand. This technically is a good sukkah. Hanami midayraisa mechsafazi. This is a perfectly good sukkah. There's nothing in the Torah that says that this sukkah is not good. For Rabbanan Hudagashubah, midayraisa, you're allowed to use the sukkah even on Shabbos. So midayraisa, this is a sukkah that could last for all 7 days, that could be used all 7 days. There's only Gzeir Rabbanan. So how could Gzeir Rabbanan make it that this sukkah is not a sukkah? And of course, Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn that if you can't use it, if Lamaisa you can't use it, even though it's only D'Rabbanan, it's still going to be a problem and you can't use it as a sukkah. But Reb Meir holds that the Baal Midaraisa was you were able to use it, therefore it's a kosher sukkah. Okay, asal behema doifen l'sukkah. What happens if you use the animal as a wall for the sukkah? So until now, we were talking about using the animal as the floor of the sukkah. The whole sukkah was resting on it. Now we want to know, what if you just use an animal as a wall of the sukkah? It stands at the side. Reb Meir Paisel, Reb Yehuda Mashra. Reb Meir holds it would be possible even to use the animal just as a wall, and Reb Yehuda holds that it would be kosher. Why is that? So Reb Meir Omer called over sheyesh by ruach chaim, anything that has air in it. In other words, the chias is also called air. This animal, we'll call it an inflatable animal. Anything that's inflatable will not be a kosher sukkah. So called over sheyesh by ruach chaim ein oisen loy doifim l'sukkah. It cannot be used as a wall of the sukkah, which is what we're discussing over here. And the loy lechi l'movi can't be used as the lechi for a movi. So we know whenever you have a movi, you have to make something that will demarcate between the inside of the movi, which is considered Rosh Hashanah, and you're allowed to carry there, and the outside of a movi, which is Rosh Hashanah. So you have to either have a koyer, which we discussed a couple of times in the last couple of days, but a lechi is also good enough, which would be a vertical post that would be mounted along the doorway, along the entrance somewhere. So you wouldn't be able to put an animal there and use an animal as your lechi. We learned that there was a kula for oil regalim. If there was a bar that was needed to get water from, to service your animals, to give your animals to drink, and it was in the Rosh Hashanah, so you wouldn't be allowed to take water from the bar, which is technically Rosh Hashanah, and remove it into the area around the bar, which is Rosh Hashanah. So they made these 4 L-shaped walls in the 4 corners, and that created a virtual enclosure, which then created the Rosh Hashanah around the area where the bar was. So this way you can take water out of the bar. So you cannot use animals to make these L-shaped walls. So in all of these cases so far, if you could use these animals, it would create a kula, because in the case of Pasan Labirois, it would allow you to take water out of the bar. In the case of Doif the Sukkah, it would allow you to use it as a sukkah. But this case is v'lagoyla lekever. You can't use it as a top of a kever. The cover of a kever is called a goylo, and that has a din tumah, becomes tumah just like a mace. So here we're saying if you used an animal to cover the kever and someone touched the animal, he wouldn't become tumah like he was touching a mace. So in this case, by not being considered a goyla kever, it's actually a kula because it won't have the tumah of a goyla. In the name of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, they said, "Af ein koisun alav gitei nashim." You're not allowed to write a get on an animal, and then give your wife to the animal. My time at Reb Meir. What is the svara of Reb Meir? Why you cannot use anything that has life to it, anything that's alive, you cannot use for any of these items, like Pasuk Birois, like Sukkah, like get. Abaya Amar Shema Thomas, because we're afraid the animal will die. So if you're trying to use an animal for a sukkah and the animal dies, you're not going to have a sukkah left. Rashi says, the baby might die on Yom Tov, and it will fall. And now you're missing a wall. That means if you didn't have another sukkah prepared, you're not going to be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. Later on, the Gemara is going to ask, a gzeira passes why you shouldn't rely on the animal to serve a purpose like a wall. But uva goylo, the kulahi, but by the goylo, it's only a kula if the animal is not considered a goylo. My time, why there would Reb Meir say that it doesn't take on the tumah of a goylo. So again, Abai says that we're afraid it's going to die. Reb Zeir Amasham Tivrach. We're not afraid it's going to die. We're afraid it's going to run away. And then you're going to lose your wall. So there's 2 reasons why you can lose your wall. Either because the wall could die, or because it could run away. So Zok to Gemara. The Gemara wants to analyze, is there a difference to halacha between Reb Zeir's approach, that it's al Shema Tivrach, or Abaye's approach because it's Shema Thomas. So Zok Gemara, Bepil kosher. If you had an elephant, which is a massive thing, and it's tied up, Kula Amalei Pligi. Nobody disagrees. Everybody holds that for sure their mayor would allow you to use it as a wall. Why? Because it's tied up, so it's not running away. So the concern that Reb Zera had is non-existent where it's tied up. And the problem that'll die, the nami mayis yes b'nevlosayud. Even if the elephant dies, and now it's one big heap of dead mass, that heap of dead mass will still be 10 tefachim high because it's a huge animal. So there, it for sure would not be a problem. Keep pligi, where would there be a machlokes between Reb Zera and Abaye if this would also be possible as a wall? According to Reb Meir, is bepil she'eina kosher. You had an elephant that was not tied up. If you hold the whole reason why you can't use an animal for a wall, like Abaye says, is because it might die. We're not concerned if this elephant dies, because if this elephant dies, you still have the elephant in the room, and you could still form your wall. Lamanda Omar, Gzera, Shema Tivrach, but if the Gzera might run away, Chashinan, if the elephant is alive and it's not tied down, yes, it could just run away in the middle, and then you'll lose your wall. According to Abaye, who hold the reason why her mayor holds you can't use this for a wall because it might die, is he not also concerned that it could run away? It's a very valid concern. So why isn't it both? So according to the man who holds Shema Thomas Necha Shema Tivrach, shouldn't he also be concerned that it could run away? Avada, he must be concerned. So therefore, we have to change things around. And we have to say, Elabapil she'ene kosher, if you have an elephant that's not tied down, Kula Alma loy pligi, everybody will agree that you cannot use it because it could run away. And even Abaye has to agree that there's a chash that it can run away, and therefore you can't use it as a sukkah. Ki pligi bibehema kashur. If it was not an elephant, it was a regular behema, but it was tied down. Even if it's tied down, it could still die, and then it won't be 10 tefachim high anymore. So Abaye would hold in such a case, it wouldn't be allowed. But according to Rav Huna, who's not choishes that the animal might die, he's only choishes that the animal might run away. We're not worried that it's going to run away because the animal was tied down. On the flip side, yes.
How does this impact the previous machlokes, where Rabbi Meir said that the sukkah al gabe behema, al gabe shnei susam, according to Rashi, is going to be kosher? Remember, that sukkah was going to be kosher, even if the animal dies, or if the animal runs away. Maybe we could say that the animals were tied down, according to Rashi, and then places doesn't have the problem that the sukkah is going to move around.
So let's look. So there the question was, if it has to be roy for 7 days. So so he holds the sukkah is good. The sukkah is good because even though you cannot use the sukkah on Yom Tov, even though you can't use the sukkah on Yom Tov, you're allowed to use it the rest of the week. But there's never a chashash that you're going to be relying on it for Yom Tov and then it'll walk away on Yom Tov because everybody agrees that sukkah you wouldn't be able to use on Yom Tov.
So you could let's do one thing at a time. The places could be answered, meaning Rashi could be answered with places. Places is kasha on Rashi could be answered by saying that the animals were tied up. Then the animal is not like a mita that can move around. Is that not so?
Yeah, but they're tied up, and you still can't use them on Yom Tov because it's also to be mishamish with a balchai. Yeah, in a chanami. But the question is, there'll still be a machlokes between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, because if you hold every sukkah, I'm sorry.
Is answered.
But even according to Tosfos, you still can't use this on Yom Tov.
Right, but I'm saying Tosfos' kasha on Rashi could be answered
if it was tied down. Yeah, in Echanami. You're saying if you hold it was tied up, so then you don't have a problem that it's considered mobile. I'm not sure because it's still considered mobile just because it's tied up now. It's a mobile thing. You can easily untie the animal and walk away. Would tying it down make it that it's not mobile? Tying it down makes it that you're not worried the wall will collapse.
Right. That's what
So let me ask you a question. A bed which is mobile, right? A bed doesn't need to be tied down. A bed is mobile even if it's not tied down because it's designed to dismantle and to relocate. Yet it's still considered mobile.
Got it.
So when you tie an animal down, I don't know if it's better than a bed.
Unless you shoot the animal. I get it. I understand. Okay.
So, I didn't think of that perspective. It's a very good point. Okay. Lumanda Omar, Gzeira, Shema Tivrach, if you learn like Rav Huna, that the Gzeira is that it might run away, why aren't you Chayshish Nech Shema Thomas? The same question that we asked on Abaye, that you should also be concerned, Shema Tivrach, we'll ask on Rav Huna, why aren't you also concerned Shema Thomas? So Gemara, Misa lo shchicha. Misa is not shchiach. It's much more likely that an animal will run away than that an animal will die in the middle of Yom Tov while you need it for your sukkah. So come to Chayis, when Abaye said there's Gzeira Shema Thomas, he means it's also Shema Thomas. There's Gzeira Shema Tivrach, but also Gzeira Shema Thomas. And when Rav Huna said there's only Gzeira of Shema Tivrach, he meant he's only worried Shema Tivrach, he's not worried Shema Thomas. So because of that, the nafkamina would be if you eliminate the concern that I might run away because it's tied down, do you still have the gzeira that I might die? According to Abaye, you do, and according to Rav Huna, and according to Rav Zera, you don't. Okay, Frek the Gemara. Okay, you have your animal, it's acting as a wall, and you have it tied down, and if you hold that there's no gzeira shema tamas, it will be a good wall. Frek the Gemara, why? The legs of the animal don't form a wall. It's wide open. I understand the body of the animal, but what about where the legs are? There's no wall there, and an animal is pretty tall. Zokta Gemara, the Ovid lay behutza v'dafna. In fact, you'd have to enclose the area between the legs of the animal in order to use the animal as a wall, so that it should be enclosed. So you enclose the area in between their legs with some type of hutza v'dafna, or like leaves or vines or stuff like that. Rashi's luleve dekel anfe 8 branches. Take more of a dilma rava. What are you going to do if the animal decides that he wants to take a rest on Yom Tov and he sits down? There goes your entire sukkah because the animal sat down. The mesicha ba'ashli milail. What you did is you actually suspended the animal from above. So even if the animal bends its knees, it will not go down because you have the animal suspended from above. And therefore, there's no chashash that the animal will lie down. In fact, once the animal is suspended from above, so then why are we concerned that the animal will die and collapse to the floor? It's suspended from above. If you're learning that the animal is being suspended from above, so even if its legs buckle, the animal will still remain up there. So why is there a problem of an animal dying? So tomorrow, because when the animal dies, it contracts a little bit. What are you going to do if you didn't put the schach right on top of the animal? You mounted the schach on a frame, and the schach was within 3 tfachim of the animal, and therefore, using lavud, you connected your schach to the animal. But now, if the animal dies, even though it's still suspended in the air, but the kivan, I gotta wait till it focuses. The kivan, the maisa, once this animal is going to die, what's going to happen is kavtza, it shrinks. And therefore, the lavadaita, you might not notice it on Yom Tov, and then you'll be sitting in a sukkah where the schach is more than 3 tfachim away from the wall, and therefore it's not a kosher sukkah. So, even the ma'isa kafta, misma'it, retreat, maybe it means retreat, but it becomes smaller. V'havale shloisha. Now there'll be a gap of 3 tfachim between the dead animal and the schach. Uvatale lavud, will no longer have lavud, and therefore ve'ein kandoifin, then we'll have a sukkah that's missing a wall. So because of that, if you're choshesh shema tamas, you have a problem, even if it's suspended in the animal, and you know it won't sit down. But if you're not choshesh for misa, then we don't have a problem because this animal will for sure not run away, and it for sure won't be able to sit down, and therefore it can act as a proper wall. Practically more. Umi Omer Abaye that Reb Meir Chayish Lamisa. Reb Meir was the one. Abaye was the one who learned Pshat in Reb Meir that not only you're choishes that the animal might run away, you're also choishes that the animal will die, and therefore the case specifically where it was a potential problem was where you had the animal suspended, so you're not worried about it sitting down, you're not worried about it running away. But if it dies, it will become a little bit smaller. It would pull a little bit away from the wall, and the wall it will put a little bit. It would pull a little bit away from the schach. And if you were relying on Lovet to connect this animal, which is the wall, to the schach, you're going to lose that. So, Frek Tamar, is that the case? Does Rabbi really hold that according to Reb Meir, we're chayish l'misa? It's up to Gemara and Rabbi Yehuda loy chayish. So, are you going to learn? In fact, is Abaye learning? In fact, that the machlokes of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is whether or not we're chayish that something or someone's going to die. But nan, I'm going to show you from a Mishnah that that's not the case, because the Mishnah says as follows: Bas Yisrael shenisas l'koyin. A woman that's a Yisraelis that marries a kohen. So she's only allowed to eat truma because of her husband. If she loses her husband, then she's no longer allowed to eat truma unless she has children. So what happened is her husband traveled far away. So we don't know where he is. We don't know if he died or not. She can continue eating truma. She can assume her husband's still alive. She can assume that he's alive. So here clearly you see that you're not choshish for Misa, because if you're choshish that someone dies, that you would have to stop eating truma. The Gemara asked a kasha on this Mishnah from a different case. There was, Rashi says, maybe he was going to war. So we were afraid if he would die suddenly, she would remain in Aguna. Or maybe they were worried that since she didn't have children, she would need chalitza, and he didn't want it to be tied to his brother. The noisin laget kishubari, he gave her a get when he was healthy. And he tells her, get se yehi legershecha sha'achas kodemisasi. I'm giving you a get 1 hour before I die. You should be mugreshus. This way, you'll never be zakok liibum, and you won't have a problem of finding my brother to get chalitza. So what does he do that? Allah is asura lechal b'truma miyad. She's not allowed to eat truma immediately. Rashi says emu kohen, he Israelis. If the husband was a kohen, she was Israelis, and her only rights to eat truma was because she was married to him, she will no longer be able to eat truma. Why? The Shem Mizu, Ki Hasha, Shekodim Misasai. Every minute you have to suspect that this might be the last minute before he dies, and that makes her Migureshus. Rehi Migureshus Mimenu. Alma, you see from here, Misa Shchicha V'Chashinallah. So in the first case, where we allow her to continue eating truma, we're not choshish that her husband dies. But in the case of the get, we are choshish that he dies. So it's a stira. Are we choshish or are we not choshish that someone will die? From Abaye loikash, Abaye said it's in fact not a contradiction. It's two different mandabrim. Harab Meir, the loichayish lamisa. The first mission that we quoted, that the Bas Yisrael can continue eating truma even though her husband's gone, which clearly is not choshish lamisa, is following the shita of Reb Meir. And Harab Yehuda and the brayso that says you are choshish is going to Reb Yehuda the chayish lamisa. Tanya, where do you find that there's a machlokes between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda of whether or not you're chayish l'misa? Because we looked at another case which we're familiar with, and that is halakech yayin mibein hakusim. If you buy wine from kusim, Rashi says, how could you buy wine from kusim? If you hold that kusim are ovdei avodah zarah, why are you allowed to buy their wine? It should be stam yayin. Zok to Gemara, Zok Rashi, it's kodim shegozra aleim kedarim bakol shoychim. There was a point in time where Chazal saw that the kusim were being ovdei avodah zarah, even though they were megayer, and therefore they said that you're no longer allowed to use their wine. So this brayso that discusses buying wine from kusim must be before that gezerah. but you know for sure that they didn't mafresh trumas and maisers. So you have to be mafresh trumas and maisers. And Rashi says we're speaking about moments before Shabbos where you don't have time to be mafresh the trumas and maisers properly. A, or B, if you don't have any kalim to put the truma into. If you want to be mafresh truma from a barrel of wine, you need a tahar barrel of wine to put the truma into, and you didn't have anything. So you didn't have a way of being able to be mafresh the trumas and maisos from this barrel of wine in the conventional fashion. So what could you do? You're allowed to say that tomorrow after Shabbos, I'm going to get kalim and I'll be set up to actually separate wine. The two lugan that I'm separating tomorrow, harei hein truma. They should be truma now, which means anything that I drink now will not be truma, because I'm going to show you later on after Shabbos when I separate the two lugan, those were the lugan that were always destined to be truma, not anything that I would have drank on Shabbos. Asara ma'aser rishon, 10 would be ma'aser rishon, Tisha would be ma'aser sheni, and then umeichel v'shoysim miyad. And then the ma'aser sheni you could be paida and drink right away, or alternatively you could use the rest of the wine. Divrei Reb Meir, that is the svar of Reb Meir. Now when we learned this Gemara last time, where does Taisha say we learned in Yuma. Over there we had an interesting shaila. Why is the amount of truma 2 lugan out of 100? The answer to that is because we know that there's 3 different types of people that give different types of truma. Really, midaraisa chita achas potesis akri. One little tiny little bit of truma will be enough to make all of your produce chulin, take away its status of tevel. But the Gemara teaches us that an average person gives 2%, which is 1 out of 50. A stingy person gives 1 out of 60, and a generous person gives 1 out of 40. So this price is based on 2 out of 100, which represents 1/50th, 2%. So that's why it's shnei lugan shani hafish. But the problem that you run into is if you were first mafresh truma, so now you're left with 98 lugan. If you're left with 98 lugan, so then how could you be? Why are you mafresh 10 for ma'aser rishon? The way it works is it's not all based on the original quantity. It's based on what's remaining. So once you've already been mafresh the truma, now you're only left with 98. So what the Brisa should have said, that 9.8 lugan remain ma'aser rishon, because it's not a full 10 anymore, because you've already diminished the pile or the barrel by 2 lugan. So Tosfos offers an interesting teretz there, and he says as follows. He says, since midaraisa chita achas potesis akri, midaraisa, he didn't have to give 2 lugan for truma. He could have given a drop, and then there would have still been 100 lugan left to give 10 for ma'aser rishon. Because you want to be a tzaddik and you want to give the kohen more, me, the Levi, I should have to suffer? No. So therefore, even if you gave 2% for truma, since you didn't have to give anywhere near that, you have to pay the 10% of ma'aser to the Levi on the full amount, even before you took away the truma. So Reb Meir holds you could do this. In other words, and I'm not concerned that something will happen to this barrel of wine later on that will mess up my plan. That's what Reb Meir holds. What Rabbi Yehuda holds, Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Shimon Oishud. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Shimon held that you couldn't do this. And the Rashi tells us that the Gemara is going to tell us soon, Barmina, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Shimon hold you can't do this is Shema Yibak HaNoid. What's going to happen if after you drink the wine on Shabbos, before you have a chance to separate the truma that you were supposed to, and the ma'aser that you were supposed to, the barrel breaks and all the wine spills out. So now you never ever were mafresh the trumas and maasers. So come to chaysh, you never were mafresh trumas and maasers, which means when you drank the wine, it was tevel. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this method. But what we gather from here is Rashi is Alma Rabbi Yehuda chayish lo b'kiyas hanoid. You see, Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're concerned that a barrel would split, which is a highly unlikely thing to occur. And therefore, so so you see, to the contrary, instead of Reb Meir being the one who's choshesh lemisa, here he's not choshesh lebekiyas hanayit. Instead of Reb Yehuda saying that you're not choshesh lemisa, over here he's choshesh lebekiyas hanayit. And if you think about it, misa, it's much more reasonable to be choshesh lemisa, because everybody will eventually die, and everything will eventually die. But a barrel is not destined to crack. So if Rabbi Yehuda holds that even in a barrel, which is not destined to crack, you're still worried that the unlikely thing might occur, the barrel might crack, for sure he should be choshesh lemisa. So that's where we have a problem. So to Gemara epoch, you're going to have to switch things around. Zot Rashi, epoch means loy sheninu abaye kidig amrit ela epoch sheninu. So if we go back to Amud Beis, we had a steer in between a Mishnah and a Brisa. The Bas Yisrael Shenishus Lakoyim said, you're not Choshesh Lamisa, and the Reza Gitach said, you are Choshesh Lamisa. This Mishnah and this Brisa are in fact unidentified. We don't know who the Tana of this is. Abaye was the one who said that the Tana of the Brisa that says that you can't eat Truma is Reb Meir, and the Tana of the Brisa that you could eat Truma is Reb Yehuda. But they don't say that. That's Abaye saying it. The problem is, Abaye, you can't say this anymore because we've proven to you that it's exactly the opposite. So therefore, in Abaye, you have to say Epoch. Abaye is going to have to say that, consistent with this brisa regarding Truma, it's Rabbi Yehuda who's Choshesh Lamisa. So it's Rabbi Yehuda who would hold that a woman whose husband, Israelis, whose husband is a Kohen, who goes away, she would no longer be able to eat from Truma. And there would be Reb Meir who holds that she would be able to eat, because you see clearly from the Lakech Yain that Reb Meir is the one who's not Choshesh Lamisa, and it's Rabbi Yehuda who's Choshesh Lamisa. So Zok to Gemara, that's fine. You could be Epoch Abaye, and you could say that there's no steer between the brisa of wine and the brisa of eating the truma when your husband goes away. But the problem is, so Epoch Meir Chayish Lamisa, Rabbi Yehuda Chayish Lamisa. But the problem is, we still have a problem because there's a stira in our Mishnah. Because in our Mishnah, where we said, in our Brisa, in our Gemara, where we said that Reb Meir holds that you're choshesh, that the animal's going to die, and therefore you cannot use it as a sukkah. How do you explain that? How do you square that with the Brisa by the wine that says Reb Meir is not concerned that the barrel will break, or he's not concerned that the husband of this Yisraelis, that the Kohen will die. So I guess we'll have to we'll just leave one more line and then we'll stop. For Gemara, the Tanya, also the Behema Doif and the Sukkah, Reb Meir Poisel, Reb Yehuda Machshir. So what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? How does that align with what we learned? Exactly the opposite, where Reb Meir holds you not Chayish Lamisa. The Gemara Kasha Reb Meir, it's going to be a steer from Reb Meir to Reb Meir. Reb Meir by Sukkah says your choshed, the animal's going to die. Yet Reb Meir by Lakeich Yain is not choshed, that the barrel's going to break. And Reb Meir by the Eishes Kohen is not afraid that the Kohen's going to die. Reb Meir Misa Shchicha Bekiyas Hanoid Lo Shchicha. We're not worried by the case of the barrel that the barrel's going to break, because it's not shchiach, and after the Mosel al Hashem. You could give the wine over to a shomer to watch to make sure it shouldn't break. We'll stop here and we'll be mamshech from here tomorrow, or we'll be mamshech from here Motzei Shabbos, because this gets already into a new sugya. So we'll stop here. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos, and Motzei Shabbos we will learn at 10:30. Okay, have a wonderful one.